Okay, you want to make a podcast. That's awesome. Welcome to the world of content creation.
But oh no, you've never made a podcast before. And maybe, even more troubling, have no idea about any equipment, any ideas, or more.
Well, the great news is that John and I are here to help walk you through all of this with our detailed series on creating a podcast. And in this, we're going to cover all aspects of creation from conceiving your idea to releasing the show.
This first episode is on creating your podcast. In this video, we will cover the planning and conceptualizing that comes before hitting record on your device.
Having a clear understanding of what you want your program to look and sound like will not only save you time and headaches, but also give you the organization and discipline to continue doing the show, or even to plan out a season structure.
Where do you start? For me, I think it's best to conceive a strong idea. Many people take the just wing it approach to creating a podcast and other content. And I think that's the exact opposite approach of one we should take. This may be a moment where, as a creator, you need to talk or have a stern conversation with yourself. Sometimes we're not as entertaining as we think we are. On the fly, and planning will ensure you're most likely to achieve success. To start, I would recommend conceiving an idea for the show. For example, let's say you wanted to create a show about baking. Great, we've got our first step.
Now that you've picked the topic umbrella, as it were, we need to figure out some specificity here. Namely, how will your show differ from what will likely be countless other shows covering the same or similar topics? This is incredibly important. Finding your niche within the market will help you narrow down an audience. If you're unsure of how to find this out, simply do a search for your basic topic. So in this instance, in this example, we're going to be searching for baking podcasts. After you do that, you can see what your competition looks like, and in turn, maybe you'll find some inspiration from what you want to make.
Don't worry if you feel it's too specific or too weird. If you create a great product, there is an audience for it. This is key. So in this example, baking is too specific. Maybe instead though, your show is about changing public opinion on how underrated a great oatmeal raisin cookie is, and you'll be exploring different cookies to find the ultimate one through this show.
Great! We have a pretty solid idea now, and you're ready to move on to the next phase of planning. I have a background in classic FM radio, and when I would build a show for on-air broadcast, I would plan out my time slot. So I brought this to podcasting. And in turn, for most podcasts, I would recommend adhering to an hour or less of content. Again, for the sake of this example, we're going to use an hour as our template. The question next is, how do we break up that hour?
This kind of prep is huge. A lot of people think they can get into podcasting and do what I refer to as the two guys just talking format. There are some great examples of incredibly popular shows that have done this. However, for every Joe Rogan podcast, there are likely millions of not as good shows attempting the same format. Planning this out in detail ensures that you are, again, most likely to succeed. If you don't heed my warnings on creating a specific topic and decide to do the two people talking, I still think it's so important to at least take some notes on some topics you want to cover.
Some of your final steps in planning are to think of how you'd like to release the show. Is it a show of seasons where you release a few episodes, maybe take some time off and then come back? Is it a show that you anticipate being able to produce weekly or bi-weekly? All of this will be easily determined by both your topics and you thinking critically about what you truly believe is attainable for your own schedule. It's important that your audience is aware of your planned release schedule, as adhering to your schedule and consistency is so important to the audience. That means it's totally okay if you can't do a show weekly, but if you tell the audience it's weekly, they will expect it to be weekly. So it's incredibly important that you set your own release schedule and stick to it. That way, the audience will always know when to expect your return. If you start a show planning for it to be weekly but drop off or change this, you run the risk of potentially souring the audience's attention span.
Another great thing to keep in mind during planning is how timely your release is. So for example, if you're doing a show about baseball, you probably shouldn't release it during the off season unless it's important to the show's narrative. Audiences will want to have immediate feedback to what they're experiencing. Think about the popularity of AMC's supplementary shows for Breaking Bad and The Walking Dead. Their follow-up shows are immediately after the newest episode of the actual program.
There you have it, everyone. These are some of our best practices and tips for creating a podcast, and I hope you've enjoyed. Of course, let us know if you have any questions, and we'd be happy to answer them. As I mentioned at the top of the episode, we're actually creating an entire series for you on how to create your podcast. So make sure you watch the next episode where we go over at length how to actually record your podcast with the field recorder we've provided for you. Thank you so much for watching.